Thank you all for attending and welcome to Project Opioid Tampa Bay's Link Lunch and Learn webinar. We are focusing today on our legislative preview for 2022. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Masa Mochizuki. I'm Outreach Director of Project Opioid Tampa Bay. If you are joining us for the first time, let me briefly tell you a little bit about Project Opioid Tampa Bay. We're part of a statewide initiative funded by the Florida Blue Foundation. And we were brought to the Tampa Bay area by the Tampa Bay Partnership. Sorry about that. By the Tampa Bay Partnership. And the goal is to mobilize business, faith, and nonprofit leaders in our region to join with national stakeholders or traditional stakeholders in order to reduce overdose deaths in our community. We seek to accomplish this through a collection of interlocking efforts, including advocacy, education, and collaboration between the business community, frontline professionals, and members of our community committed to saving lives from the opioid epidemic. This problem needs our collective efforts because we now find ourselves in a crisis. In 2020 rather, the Tampa Bay region lost 30 people each and every week to an opioid fatality. That's more than a 60% increase from the previous year. And what's worse is that fentanyl that is killing everyone is now in every illicit drug. There is no such thing as recreational drug use at this point. It is Russian roulette. Actually, 2 out of every 5 pills not from a pharmacy contain a deadly dose of fentanyl. Recreational drug use is more deadly than putting a single bullet into the chamber of a gun, spinning it and putting it to your head and pulling the trigger. You have a 1 in 6 shot of dying from Russian roulette. So surviving, you have a 5 in 6 chance. Those are better odds than taking a pill from a friend or buying drugs from the street. So definitely the severity of the problem we see in the numbers. We feel the impact through our stories and experiences. And the opioid epidemic affects everyone. And we're so grateful that you are joining us to cultivate the connections and collaboration needed to take strategic action to reduce deaths.
I remember having the screenshots.
And toward that end, it's important for us to always keep in mind the people with lived experience while doing this work. So I would like to introduce Bianca Talarico. She is a clinical program manager at Riverside Recovery. She has a master's degree in addiction studies and is pursuing a doctorate in public health. I would like to introduce Bianca Talarico to share her recovery story. Bianca? Oh, go ahead. I'm going to unmute you. If you can unmute yourself, Bianca.
There we go. Okay. Sorry, technology is not my forte. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess you can tell from the fact that I am here and the fact that I have, received degrees and have the position that I have, that I'm one of the fortunate people who has come out on the lucky end of a relationship with drugs and alcohol. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to get sober before this type of poisoning of recreational drugs, I guess, was so rampant. Although I do have my own experience accidentally taking fentanyl and waking up, face down on my kitchen floor. Fortunately, that scared me, and I flushed the rest of what I thought was a different drug, down the toilet. But a lot of people, aren't that lucky to wake up and have a chance to do that. I started off, I was certainly aware of the fact that I had alcohol problems when I was introduced to opiates. But it kind of came like at a badly serendipitous time. I was facing a lot of consequences with my alcohol use. And I happened to be hospitalized for a spider bite where I was given Dilaudid in the hospital for the pain. And I loved it. And I came out of that hospital and I mentioned to someone at a bar that I love the feeling. And from there, my use took off. It took me a lot of consequences and a lot of trying of different things to be able to finally get sober. I tried Suboxone, which did not work for me personally. The experience that I had with that was that I was able to trade it for other drugs. And the experience of coming off of that was extremely difficult for me because of the withdrawal symptoms. Ultimately, I ended up in Turning Point of Tampa, the treatment center down here, which is 12-step based. I stayed in there for 60 days and then completed like their entire program. And I lived at Opal House, Women's Sober Living House, which I'm also a huge advocate of. I try to give back to, those facilities when I have the chance. I guess for me, it took like really investing everything about myself really into recovery. I had formerly been a registered nurse and I lost my nursing license as a result of my behavior, which I should have. I'm just getting to the place now where receiving that back might be an option, which I feel extremely grateful for. But I couldn't have gotten anywhere that I've gotten today without like a huge support system, a lot of resources. Also, I wanted to mention too that like in my using days, I did save someone by giving them Narcan, because at that time I lived in Vermont and there were needle clinics that gave out Narcan to people. And so, I've seen that firsthand save someone's life from an overdose. And now I work in treatment and I see people, all the time who either are actively trying to use fentanyl or who have gotten it in other drugs. It's really scary, the number of people that we lose who are, former clients who don't stay sober. And it's really sad to see like the impact that has on families and communities. I definitely feel grateful that you guys are doing this. I think that, addiction doesn't just affect the person who's addicted. It affects everyone in that person's life and the community as a whole. So for me, it's taken a village to help me to come out of this. And I think that is what it takes. So I appreciate that there's advocacy like this out there trying to bring people together to address this issue, because also, as you can see, like when people are able to get out of this, they're often able to return to their communities and give a lot back. Every life is worth saving. And I appreciate you inviting me here to speak.
Okay, I'm going to take over from here. Bianca, thank you. This is Jennifer Webb, and I'm trying to, oh good, there I am on the screen. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I just noticed that we had Representative Learned join us from Tallahassee between committee meetings. But before I welcome him, I was wondering one thing. If there's something that you would want people to know, like who are in this field and who maybe don't have personal experience with this, or policymakers. I mean, we have Rep Learned in the waiting room. Like, what would you really want to drive home to him and his colleagues up in Tallahassee who are making decisions that are going to impact all of us in this room, because we are all involved in behavioral health policy to one extent or another, and that'll impact people with substance use disorders?
I think that's a great question. I do think that rehabilitation efforts are never wasted. It can take many tries for someone to be able to sustain recovery. I know from statistics that most criminal, people who are in jail are in there for drug-related crimes. And I definitely think that the funding that's available for incarcerated people is inadequate. I'm a huge fan of the Marchman Act. I know that Hillsborough County does that really well. But a lot of people who are Marchman Acted don't have the funds to pay for treatment and do not have insurance privately. So I would say, just funding and trying to remove the stigma is so important, because the impact that every changed person has on the world around them is so great.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming and sharing your story. And I think there's no way of driving home the point that, and pushing against stereotypes of who are and are not people who suffer with substance use disorder is by sharing our stories, by coming out, by being honest and transparent. I mean, I think that by us doing it, it gives those in positions of power over the process even more kind of courage to come out and share their own stories, and to legislate from that place of connection instead of from fear of being found out. And that's powerful. So thank you so much, and good luck with I think it's amazing that you might have your nursing degree or nursing license back. And I want to welcome Representative Learned. Where are you? I saw you log on. Did we lose you? Did you have to log off again?
No, I think I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you, Rep Learned. So we haven't even talked about the bills yet, but I would love, I don't want to steal your thunder. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your fentanyl bill?
Yes. Love to, and thank you. You're being very generous calling it my bill. I sponsored it. This was Jen brought this to me. It was a great idea. Happy to be your champion up here for it. But it's House Bill 6101. It's a bill that would legalize fentanyl test strips. I think it's a cool no-brainer of a bill. I do have a little bit of a headache this morning. So we're going to be in a little bit of a fight with the Sheriff's Association, but I'm going to go back and try to run it as a PCB where we just do fentanyl test strips. They have some heartburn about expanding it to all testing equipment, but I'm working it. I have a meeting with Chair Brennan this afternoon, and we're going to try to PCB it, or at least that's my proposal. So, and I did talk to the chair, so he's good with what we're trying to do. So I think it's a cool thing. And I think, we've got 5,800 people who died from overdose deaths last year. This is a great way to help reduce that number and try to help people. Bianca, kind of like what you were saying, right? Give people an opportunity to survive this and get back into living their lives. And that's the entire game right there. Like how we can prolong people's lives so that they have more and more opportunities to get clean, get back on the streets. This is a good no-brainer for bill. And Jen, I'm in your debt for bringing it to me.
And who is your companion? Who has the companion bill in the Senate? Rep. Learned?
So I believe it's Chef Jones, but if we do it as a PCB, I'm gonna have to go reshop it. So, but he's our champion over there. He's a wonderful guy. He cares deeply about this, and I think, we got the A team, so we'll be good.
Absolutely. And for those who aren't familiar with what a PCB is, can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, happy to. So, there's a little bit of this process where you put your name on things and you get it done, and this is the Andrew Learned bill. And then there's how most things pass, which is without your name on it, right? So we do things that are going to get it through the process, but then the PCB means it's technically a bill by the committee, and then this will be the committee's bill to pass. It's all good. It's helpful in the long run because at the end of the day, what we care about is getting test strips out to people and getting some of this grant money flowing so that we can get people into rehab and make our street safer. So procedurally, the rest of you don't worry about it. I got it. I'm working it, and we're going to get this thing done.
And Rep. Learned, if people want to write you with experiences or things where you can weave into your testimony or just experience, their own experiences of where life-saving harm reduction techniques have helped, how do they get that information to you?
Yeah. So first of all, my cell phone number is on the website. It's 813-853-6241. Just call me anytime. We've got a really cool action center we set up for this legislative session. So andrewlearned.com/action. And you can go there right now, and there's a button you can click to email about 6101. And that email will go straight to Chair Brennan about what this bill does and why it is important to you. You can and should email me. My email is, on the site, just like everything else. But I'm already sold. So I want you to email Chair Brennan and blow his inbox up so that he puts this on the agenda next week and we can get this bill moving. And the place to start that is andrewlearned.com/action.
So can we get somebody putting that in the chat? Andrew Learned.
I'll do it. Yeah. Happy to. And I'll put my cell in here too, in case anybody wants to reach out directly. I think it's it's a great bill, and anything we can do to help build back from this, the opioid epidemic we're dealing with right now and save lives. Like this is a no-brainer and a win-win for Florida. Well,
Rep, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you have a very busy schedule, so I'm going to let you go and maybe get a tiny bit of lunch.
You probably remember this. It's Walt Disney World Day in the Florida Capitol today, so they've turned the Capitol into a little theme park. We've got the mouse roaming the halls, so it's not as busy as you think.
Well, good. So feel free to stay with us. I'm gonna open up my PowerPoint so that I can go through additional bills related to substance abuse and safety.
You're awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rep. Learned. All right, welcome to the Behavioral Health and Safety Policy for Florida Session 2022. This is where I'm just going to give you a digest of what's coming before the Florida legislators up in Tallahassee this month and next month. That's it. Our session in Florida is just 2 short months, and we do a lot in that time. And so in order for you to be your best selves and to advocate for your clients' best, here's some bills that are of interest. You're really lucky. We have a wonderful partner here at Live Tampa Bay in the Organization of Drug-Free America. They track legislation here and in other states, and they've done a breakdown for us. We're going to focus right now on anti-drug treatment and harm reduction bills because that falls within the scope of what our coalition focuses on and has chosen to focus on. And so, like I said, these are things that are, that have been voted on by our leaders here in the Tampa Bay for areas that they want to focus on moving forward for 2025. So that's anti-drug bills, treatment, and harm reduction bills. So the first bill that we're going to talk about is actually an appropriations bill. Is a substantive bill. And it is, the sponsors are Senator Chev Jones and Representative Andrew Learned. And this bill seeks to exempt fentanyl test strips from the drug paraphernalia law. These bills were filed as what's called repealer bills, where they just X words out of the statute. However, after consulting with the Sheriff's Association, they decided to narrow the scope down to just drug tests for fentanyl and fentanyl analogs. And that would cover the deadly drugs that are out on the street that are adulterated into other substances and killing folks unknowingly. And right now, both of these bills are in the are primed to go into their criminal justice committee, but they haven't been in that committee yet. I have listed some of the criminal justice leadership in the Senate on the top side and then in the House on the bottom side. And those are the folks who set the agenda for that committee. If you see the pathway to the floor, it has to go to criminal justice first, then judiciary, then rules, then finally the Senate floor or the floor of the House. You'll see that for each and every bill. The next bill is our favorite bill. It's been up before. It's to expand who gets to become peer support specialists. It also specifies certain trainings and other things. This bill is being brought forward again this year by Senator Rouson, and Representative Fetterhoff has it in the House. This, like I said, is a bill that is a perennial bill. We like it. I'm really hoping that it gets across. I'm hoping that it gets across the finish line this year. It is in appropriations, which is the last stop before the Senate floor in the Senate, but it has 2 stops left before it gets to the floor of the House. HB 4255 is an appropriations bill. This is actually a bill to fund an anti-stigma campaign in the Tampa Bay region in our 8 county areas that would roll out a pilot project. This anti-stigma campaign is actually evidence-based. It has been proven to work in other areas, and we would be the first area in Florida that they would launch this initiative. And if it works in the Tampa Bay region, it would expand beyond our region to the entire state. It is really steeped, this anti-stigma campaign and their research is steeped in storytelling. And so it's about telling people stories of recovery and getting those stories into communities that look and feel like the folks that are telling those stories. So I might have a story, Senator Rouson might have a story, who else? There's a lot that Kirkpatrick, one of our stakeholder leaders, might have a story. Our stories are all different. They would all resonate with people in slightly different ways. And in that resignation, we then reduce the stigma. And so it has already passed the Healthcare Appropriations Subcommittee and is on the way to the General Appropriations Committee in the House. And of course, our own Representative Jackie Toledo has that bill. She's from Hillsborough County. HB 731, SB 544 is a bill that will actually expand the who can administer Narcan. It would help to get life-saving interventions like Narcan, and I think it might even include Tera bags or pill emulsifier kits. Expand those into pharmacies so that pharmacists, that they're giving out opioids, they're also giving out Narcan, they're also giving out these the Tera type bags. And it highlights the fact that civilian personnel can administer emergency opioid antagonists, or simply Narcan. So that civilian personnel and law enforcement agencies can administer Narcan, that pharmacies can order certain emergency Narcan deployments, and it's moving right along. Senator Boyd has it, and has it in the Senate. Representative Caruso from South Florida has it over in the House. Representative Caruso carries a lot of this type of policy. His son, he has a personal connection to it, and he's always a very good champion. It looks like I said, it's only got a couple of more stops before it reaches the floor of both the House and the Senate. And we can look forward to benefiting from more people being able to deploy Narcan. Representative Coster and Senator Gruder have an interesting bill. This revises the licensing requirements for social workers, marriage and family therapists, and mental health counselors, and other folks in the mental health or behavioral health sector. I am very curious what folks in the field think of this bill, because it really does. It's about like changing certification, changing requirements. It seems like the impetus, and from talking to Senator Gruder's, the impetus behind this was to get more people in the field quicker, to be able to see all of the patients. It's no secret that we have a dearth of behavioral health experts or mental health providers in Florida, in our region specifically. And so how do we meet the need? Well, we need more people in the field doing these jobs, and this is one of those solutions. It is just a few stops from the floor of both the House and the Senate, but definitely look that over. This PowerPoint has hyperlinks. The bills are hyperlinked, so you can click on them and it will take you directly to either myfloridahouse.gov for the House bill, or the Florida Senate for the Senate bill. All right, Representative Plankin and Senator Bruder have the anti-drug bill, and this is the bill that revamps what the definition of murder is to include distributing an illicit substance that is proven to have caused or is proven to have been a substantial factor in producing the death of the user. It also expands what I call the drug-free zones. Those are the zones like around schools, around nursing home, and other areas where you have heightened penalties for distributing drugs. And so the new zones would also include, not being able to sell, or heightened penalties for selling drugs 1,000 feet from a mental health facility, a healthcare facility which provides substance abuse treatment, a facility providing services that include clinical treatment, intervention or prevention, and recovery residences. And there's statutory definitions for each of those things. That's why there's those 3 dots. I just didn't want to bury you down with details, but if you want to get into the nitty gritty, you can follow the link at the top of the page and find out more about what's included in here. And it finally sets legal penalties for persons who violate the paragraph, such as felony of the 1st degree with punishment provisions. This looks like it's going to pass it's on the way to, it's already primed to go to the floor of the House, and is only 2 committees away from the Senate floor. The Sheriff's Association is behind it. Sheriff Lima is one of the major forces behind this bill. He's from Seminole County. And so that is moving along.
For the folks who are listening in, there's going to be this PowerPoint that is going to be shared after the fact. We will follow up with an email. And so from here, because of the fact that we have, if you look here, we have our effective advocacy for citizens, which Jennifer will be back to present a little bit more on what does effective advocacy look like. And toward that end, we wanted to share with you actually one of the folks who is actually traveling up to Tallahassee at this moment for Hill Day to advocate. And so we're going to go ahead and show a video from Ashley Neal. Legislation doesn't get passed without, as Jennifer said, involvement and support from citizens and from organizations. And so Ashley Neal is a PR and media strategist for Turning Point of Tampa, a Florida native and a person in long-term recovery. She's got a bachelor's degree in communications with over 15 years experience in the nonprofit and private sector. And she has a keen awareness of the community, strong set of personal and professional ethics, and knows how to get things done. She serves as the state lead for Florida Alliance for State Advocacy. And after the video presentation, if she is able to join us, then she'll be able to answer a couple of questions. But without further ado, we are going to go ahead and share with you a video that she pre-recorded so that you get a chance to hear from Miss Ashley Neal.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on your legislative preview. My name is Ashley Neal. I am the Public Relations and Media Strategist for Turning Point of Tampa, and I'm also the state lead for the Florida Alliance for State Advocacy, which is an initiative of the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers. So just to talk about that a little bit, on the federal level, we've always been, as treatment providers, really well represented by groups like the National Association, but we don't necessarily have anything on the state level. So the National Association actually put out the charge to treatment providers to come together in their states and form these alliances for state advocacy. And the one in Florida was actually started this year. I think we had our first meeting in April, if I remember correctly. So our goal was to have a Recovery Hill Day. And, you know, this is my kind of first dive into advocacy work. And I didn't have a lot of experience in things like setting up meetings with legislators. So we partnered with the Florida Coalition Alliance this year for our Recovery Hill Day. And some of you may know the Florida Coalition Alliance is made up of the different prevention coalitions around the state of Florida. So we have the prevention side of things, and we have the treatment and recovery side of things. And we've come together for our day in Tallahassee. And I'm actually traveling today to be prepared for Tallahassee tomorrow. So that's why I'm unable to join you live on the call. So just to give you an idea of some of the things we will be talking to legislators about tomorrow, number one is the impact of marijuana legalization. I'm sure you know, if you're following any of the bill tracking going on right now, there are several bills having to do with marijuana. And our group is also very concerned with behavioral health equity. The Mental Health Parity and Addictions Equity Act that was enacted, I believe, on the federal level in 2014 is in place, and that law is calling on private health insurers to provide addiction treatment and mental health services to people in need, just like they would someone who was in need of some type of medical service. Maybe it is, you know, a surgery or some type of outpatient care, but that's really not happening. That law was passed on the federal level, but was passed down to the states to really make sure that that type of thing is happening. And so far in the state of Florida, we have not seen any legislation to do with that. So those are the two items that are pretty big for us this year in our talks with legislators. And we're really just trying to educate them. They have so many issues that they, you know, have to vote on during session, and session is only a short, very short 2 months. So we're fingers crossed that we'll have some great conversations with our elected officials and see some things maybe next year on the legislative agenda. But for this year, really just looking to inform and educate, and we'll be leaving a lot of really good information in Tallahassee. I am part of one of the groups that will be meeting with legislators from, I believe, Polk County, Hillsborough County, possibly Pinellas County, maybe Pasco County. And we do have some good information prepared. And we also have some additional information from the Hillsborough County Anti-Drug Alliance on the impacts of opioid use in the Hillsborough area. So really looking forward to our Hill Day tomorrow. And I hope you guys have a great legislative preview call. I hope the information that I provided to you is beneficial. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Fantastic. She got a chance to share a little bit about her experience and what she is doing up on for Hill Day. But for now, because of that introduction from Ashley Neal on sort of the advocacy piece of what is happening and the involvement of community organizations, I'm going to throw it back over to Jennifer Webb, who is going to be presenting on effective advocacy in this work.
All right. Well, this is my favorite training, y'all, and I've given this to many groups before. And so we talked about the bills that are going before the legislature this session. We talked about, different committees that are hearing the bills. You got to hear from Rep. Learned about his fentanyl test strip bill. You got to hear from Ashley about different professional organizations that get involved and help to organize folks to bring them up to Tallahassee to effectively advocate on issues that will impact the behavioral health policy. And so what I want to do now is I want to talk about, you have all this information, so now what? So let's say that you really love one of these bills or really do not like one of these bills. Well, how do you effectively advocate as citizens or as representatives of your organization? How do you educate lawmakers for what you think will work, what is best for your clients? In this training, you will learn the key elements and timelines in the legislative process, how to track legislation, and how to most effectively communicate with your legislators. This is one of my favorite trainings to give. I gave it when I was a state representative. I've given it to groups. I've given it to just, constituents who lived in my district. It's so important to know the process because that means because if you care enough to reach out, we want you to reach out effectively. So there's many different types of bills. And here are just some of them. There's ceremonial, resolutions, county bills, repealer bills, substantive bills, appropriations. There's lots and lots of different types of bills. Why does it matter? Well, it matters because if you're asking someone to put in, let's say, a repealer bill, that's a different kind of ask than if you're asking somebody to put in a substantive bill or an appropriation. Substantive bills are the only kind of bills really that count against representative's bill slot. Each session, your state reps get between 5 and 7, depending on who's speaker, slots for substantive bills to propose changes to legislation. They only get 7 chances to do that. In the Senate, they don't have a limit on the number of bills that they can put forward, but in the House they do. So if you're asking somebody to put forward a substantive bill, you're asking them to have 1/5 to 1/7 of their agenda focused on your issue. That's something else. That's amazing. Think about that when they say yes. How grateful we should be that folks are choosing to focus, that our elected officials are choosing to focus on our issue that's so important to us. Repealer bills don't require a bill slot. They're actually pretty low bar. All you're doing is striking through a statute. That fentanyl test strip bill in its first iteration was a repealer bill. It didn't take up a bill slot from the representative, even though it was making significant changes that could save people's lives. And then finally, appropriations, while they don't take up a bill slot, they take up a lot of political capital. Oftentimes, the chair of a committee of a budget silo will say, you know, you're a good member. What's your top 1 or 2 appropriations for this cycle? What do you really want to get funded? Well, you can only have 1 top and 2 top 2. So it really, you know, it's very competitive to get to that spot in a legislator's agenda. And also, you know, sometimes the Speaker of the House or the Senate President will ask, like, okay, there's some extra money, like, what's your top priority? What do you really want funded? And if you have positioned yourself right with your elected officials, then that might be your appropriation, might take up that top spot, especially, you know, if your appropriation is worthy of being somebody's top spot. So all of those kind of bills, they all go to bill drafting first. Bill drafting is our legislators, most of them are not attorneys, and so, but our laws are written by attorneys, and they are written in legalese and interpreted and all of that by attorneys. And so when I get a bill idea, or when somebody gets a bill idea, they take that idea, they submit it to bill drafting, and bill drafting of either House or Senate then takes that idea and puts it into statutory language and finds the right statutes and everything. And then it's a back and forth between the legislator's office and bill drafting to get it just right. Then the bill needs to be filed. That's when the public can formally see that there's something going on, that something's been going on behind the scenes. And all of that happens before the first day of session, or by the first day of session. Your bills have to be filed, and you have to have already, prior to that, put your bills into bill drafting. It's so upsetting when somebody comes up with a great idea and, like, during session, and they're like, can you get this passed this year? And it's like, well, no, this is a great idea, but I can't, because I needed to have seen this back in the summer. That's generally when our legislators start looking for their next ideas for the coming legislative session. Most bills go to 3 stops on their way to the floor. Sometimes you'll get a 4th stop or a 5th stop if it's a really complex piece of legislation that touches a lot of different statutes from a lot of different arenas. So but for the most part, 3 stops and then the floor. And so that means that, honestly, I mean, with session only being 2 months, and then committee meetings only happening, a couple of weeks a month leading up to session, what kills more bills than, like, political opposition is actually the clock. You just run out of time. There's only so much that you can do in the 60 days of session, and when it gets down to the wire, there's not another week, there's not another committee meeting, there's not another chance for your great idea to be heard. And so that's why it's so important to get those ideas in early, like I said, for the summer months, and to weigh in around that time, and then to show support early instead of waiting until late. By the time we're hearing about bills, that means that session's already underway. That means that all of the committee meetings leading up to sessions have already passed. So, know what your legislative session and what your state legislators are up to. That'll make it easier for you to weigh in a timely fashion. But let's say you do have an amazing idea, really good idea, but it's smaller in scope and you missed the deadline. The amendatory process is a great way of getting smaller in scope pieces of important legislation passed within a single legislative session. And this is always, like I said, small in scope, maybe changing a few words that would have a really big impact, or adding a small thing that really fits well with a bill that's already moving. That's all doable as an amendment. So let's say, so you care enough to either ask your legislator to, you know, sponsor a piece of legislation, to sponsor an appropriation, to put forward a repealer bill, or even to put forward an amendment. Well, if you care that much, you care enough to track your legislation and to track legislation and to be informed enough to put some of that burden of knowing what's going on in the legislation on your own shoulders. But how do you do it? My favorite site is myfloridahouse.gov. It's so easy to use. It is far superior, I think, to the Florida Senate. You can track bills there, both in the Senate and the House. You can use either, you can track bills, you can track members, you can track committees, you can track terms. So let's say it's before, let's say it's fast forward, we finish this legislative session, it's the summer. I know that people are going to start filing stuff in November. So I set up, like, I want to know every time something dealing with behavioral health or peer support specialists or the paraphernalia drug statute or the murder definition. Anytime something dealing with that is filed, I want to be informed. So I can either put in keywords, I can put in statutes, I can be alerted every time a piece of legislation is filed for that hits on that term, the peer support specialist, or that statute, whatever statute the definition of murder falls in. You can also track by person. So I said, you know, Senator Rouson always does a lot in behavioral health. Representative Caruso always does a lot. Well, you could just set up a track for their legislation. So every time they do something, you get a bing. And you can change, like, let's say you want a weekly update versus a daily or instant update. You can set all of those preferences up on this site. It's so helpful. So now you know that Senator Rouson is, you know, still continuing the good fight for behavioral health because you've seen all of his bills and the majority of them are in the behavioral health and addiction silo. Or the same thing for Rep. Caruso. Well, you can also track committees. So let's say I want to know any bill that's I know that our bills always, behavioral health bills go through Health and Human Services or healthcare appropriation committees. So you can set up every time a bill is heard in either of those committees or subcommittees that you actually get notified. So you're staying abreast of, okay, well, how many bills of all of the bills being heard in the healthcare silo are dealing with behavioral health care? Are they really prioritizing this session or no? Are they focused somewhere else? It's a great, great, great site, myfloridahouse.gov. Check it out. The second site that I absolutely adore is the floridachannel.org. It is thefloridachannel.org. You can watch every single committee and subcommittee meeting. You can see who is asking questions on a bill that you're passionate about. You can see who's a no vote. You can see what the shape of the questions and answers are taking and what the debate feels like. You can see if any concerns are expressed, and then you can respond. You can respond to the bill sponsor. So the other day, I was watching a committee and the bill sponsor says, you know, if anyone has examples of this, that this bill would create problems, please reach out to me. Well, that is a powerful solicitation of examples. I shared that with friends and they reached out and said, yes, actually, in this instance, what you're proposing would be harmful. Our legislators want to make good policy, but they need people to weigh in. And really, our democracy works best in dialogue. So be part of the process, weigh in, set your calendar if there's going to be a committee hearing on something. I generally, during the 60 days of session, I have it on my computer in the background. I'll keep in one of my earpieces and take out the other one, and I'll work and listen so that when I hear certain phrases or certain bills come up, I can pay better attention because so much happens so quickly during session. And the floridachannel.org is the best way to catch it live. They also have a great search function where you can search by this. You can search, let's say you know that it's a bill being brought forth by Representative Flaken, but you're not sure the name of it. You can just type in Flaken and it'll likely pull up the committee that the bill is heard in. You can look for the committee and you can search by committee name. You can search by bill number. It's such a great resource for tracking bills during the legislative session and understanding what's going on. All right, the final piece. So you're paying attention to your legislation and you know the bills that are being proposed for this session for the behavioral health and public safety silos, and you want to communicate with your legislator. There was a survey in 2015 that found that the best form of communication, and it surveyed all of the state senators and state representatives, that the best was a face-to-face meeting, either in the Capitol or in the district. The second best was personalized correspondence via letters or emails, and the third best was calls. Well, this is back in 2015, so I've expanded this. Still, the best is a face-to-face meeting. In the Capitol, you'll get about 15 minutes. Later on in session, you might only get 7 minutes. In the district, you'll get a good 30 minutes. Know why you're meeting, though. Don't just go and be like, hi. What's so frustrating, because legislators are problem solvers. They want to come together to help you do something. Do you want a project funded? Do you need a bill passed to make the work that you're doing easier or work better? Is this just an introduction? Like, why are you inviting me to speak somewhere? Like, what exactly do you want out of this meeting? So you need to know before you sit down what you want out of the meeting. An introductory meeting is perfectly fine. Hi, Representative Toledo. I'm Jennifer Webb with Live Tampa Bay. I just wanted to sit down to introduce you to this new organization, Live Tampa Bay, and its affiliate, Project Opioid. So that's what that looks like. Or, Senator Roussan, you've funded such great stuff. I have a really good idea to help reduce stigma in the Tampa Bay area. I'm hoping that you can, quarterback this appropriation and accept and take on this appropriation request. I have people are dying from fentanyl overdoses who don't even realize that they're doing fentanyl. Right now in Florida, fentanyl test strips are illegal. There's a very easy statutory change. Representative Learned, would you be interested in hearing more about this statutory change and how it would impact the Tampa Bay region? So that's what those introductions look like. Make it sweet, get to the point, and then go back from there. Same thing for education meetings. Rep so-and-so, I see that you voted against the peer support specialist bill. Actually, nobody voted against that bill. It's such a fantastic bill. But let's say there was some misguided representative. I am with XYZ Recovery Center from Polk County, and I wanted you to understand how we use peer support specialists to meet the needs of patients in my facility. And I've also gotten permission to share some stories from folks who are in recovery on how peer support specialists have really helped them stay on the road of recovery and reduce relapse and reduce their, their feelings of loneliness, isolation, all of the things that lead people back out to use. So these are examples of then how you can also use this framework to advocate or to educate your to your elected official things that are important to you. Always get down to the nitty gritty at the very beginning and then backfill. Personalized stories for those of you who are in recovery centers or healthcare systems are really helpful. For those who deal with big data, getting county specific data or district specific data for representatives and for senators are always helpful, because then they can say, in my community, in my district, and district, 70 if it's Michelle Rayner, let's say, or in Senate District I don't know the Senate districts, but like in my Senate district over in Hillsborough County, there's this number of people with opioid use disorder. It's so very helpful. So definitely have those face-to-face meetings, but know why you're meeting. Personalized correspondence, also a really great way of communicating. Especially if you're giving information that isn't readily available to the legislator. So like I said, I can't tell you how many times I would get emails and letters. If they were personalized, I would read them. If they were personalized and contained like either good anecdotes that touched on a specific policy or had statistics that I couldn't readily get, I would keyword them and file them, so that later when I would have my floor debate, when I'd be preparing for my floor debate or for my questions, I would pull them out and use that material, use the words of my constituents to help advocate for policy that they wanted in their own words. When I could do that, it felt like the process was really working, because I was bringing the words of my own constituents of treatment and recovery centers in my community onto the floor of the Florida House of Representatives and presenting it to all of my colleagues. And that's what we are as representatives. We represent, and so it felt really good. And it's important because it's things that I wouldn't have had the time or the ability to get while I'm up in Tallahassee doing the people's work. Calls are the third most effective. We'll get to those in a second. Social media posts in response to a question posed by a legislator, they're going to be read. If a legislator is asking for you to weigh in or to respond to a poll, do it. Stock emails and letters, less effective than a social media post in response to a question by a legislator. Social media messages and what about posts? These are not effective ways of communicating. Now, many state legislators do not even check their social media messages. This would be like Facebook Messenger, those things, because once they do, it opens up all of their social media messages to the Sunshine Act law or other kind of disclosure laws. And so to prevent that from happening, they just don't use their social media messages for legislative purposes. So a lot of times they don't even check it. So if your legislator doesn't respond to you after you've sent them a Facebook messenger message, it's not personal. It's probably that they just don't even check it. What about posts on social media? We've all seen these. This is where, let's say your legislator's talking about, I don't know, it is Earth Day, and they're talking about the importance of, clean waterways and fresh drinking water, and making sure that we're passing policies that will so that our sea level, that will create resilient shores among rising sea levels or something like that. And you, because you're really passionate about behavioral health and substance use disorder policy, are like, oh yeah, that's great, but what about people dying from addiction? Like, that is a social media post is kind of like a conversation, and you wouldn't do that in a regular conversation. Don't do it on a social media post. It hits the wrong, it hits the wrong note. It seems really tone deaf. It also are there other posts about behavioral health that you can comment on and say, and do like some positive reinforcement, like, great, I love it when you focus on this issue, or have a conversation with your elected official, like, I really wish you would post more about behavioral health. It's so important. I'll forward you some information so that you can share it with folks. A lot of times that would be a far more effective way of getting across like the importance of our issue than just a what about post. And so when I was an elected official, I followed the strategy that's on that is on the slide, and my colleagues that I talked to did as well. So office calls and messages got tallied, and that means I want you to vote no on HB 762. I just made that bill number up, but I would just tally those. Same thing for messages. When people would answer, I would answer the phone and they'd be like, vote no on on HB 782, and then hang up. And I was like, okay, like it didn't matter if I was answering or my staff was answering or they got a message. We would tally those. Notes and postcards, if they're personal, they get read and then tallied. If their emails are likely to get read and responded to and then tallied. Stock emails or stock postcards tend to just get tallied. Most people read like one to get the gist of it, and then they're like, oh yeah, this is from that group, and I'm just gonna like, mark them down. To have your voice really heard, like I said earlier, schedule a meeting. A lot of state reps give their personal cell phone numbers out. When I gave this training during our webinar last week, Rep Learned was on, and he was like, oh yeah, my cell phone number is blah, blah, blah. And he just like gave it to everybody on that webinar. Use it, but be thoughtful. I mean, that's kind of a social contract. Somebody gives you their personal cell phone and they trust you to know when to use it and when not to use it. But definitely, be thoughtful, but you can use it. So my hope, though, is that you're not just an effective educator of our legislators, that you actually build relationships, not tally marks. And so how do you do that? Well, relationships are two-way streets. So just like you and your organization might have events that you want people to attend, legislators have events that they want you to attend. Legislators also have e-newsletters that they're hoping to get out into the community. So sign up for for your legislators' newsletters. Show up to their recap sessions, their office hours, or their events that they sponsor in the community. It means so much. It's so hard as an elected official to take so much time to build up a following of folks coming in and showing up for things that we host, that when you show up, it really makes a difference, and it makes our jobs a little easier because we're taking the time to do it. We want to get out into the community what we've been doing up in Tallahassee. The other thing is, it's always our knee-jerk reaction is to tell somebody when we don't like something, especially someone in power, and that's important. Do that. Hey, I think your thinking on this issue is a little off. Let me give you some more data. Let me give you some stories from clients of why this would not be helpful, but also absolutely say thank you. Hey, I've noticed that you have put forward this peer support specialist bill for 3 years running, Senator Roussan. Thank you. Rep Toledo, I really appreciate you sponsoring this appropriation for the broader Tampa Bay community. Representative Caruso, I know that it must be kind of bittersweet putting forward this legislation that touches on something that's so personal for you. I really appreciate it. I think that your bill is going to help people. For all of the representatives who voted for the peer support specialist bill, I noticed that you voted for this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Representative. For the chair, thank you for scheduling this to be heard. It's so important. Those thank yous are so few and far between during session that they will make you, and by proxy, your issue highlighted in the minds of the chairs and the representatives and the other folks that are up there, because it's something that's wanted, that doesn't happen that often, those thank yous. The final thing is do your homework. It's really weird when you sit down with a group of people and they start talking to you about a bill that they are advocating or educating their legislators on behalf of, and they don't even realize that you're a sponsor of the bill or a co-sponsor of the bill. And because oftentimes our talking points almost seem a little adversarial sometimes, like, I want you to pass this bill and it's important. And it's like, whoa, I know it's important. I'm a co-sponsor of it. So do your homework. Know when your legislator has actually taken initiative on issues that you're passionate about. Mention it to them, acknowledge them. If you miss something, like they're presenting a bill that you're passionate about, say, hey, I really missed that. I'm sorry. I think I'm going to go home later and watch it. Or like, how did that committee meeting go? I know that you generally speak on behalf of behavioral health policy. Did you have a chance to debate, or did you ask any questions? What do you think? Those are amazingly effective ways, because it shows that like you're interested in developing a relationship. And where I want us to really get, and how we'll know that we are effective in our education and in our relationship with our elected officials, is when they call us, is when they call you, because you're the specialist. They're not. Even though I was passionate about behavioral health policy and got NAMI Legislator of the Year award, I didn't actually, the specialists weren't me. The specialists were you in the community. I would call Diane Clark and say, hey, I'm looking at this bill. Can you help give me can you help me understand how this would impact you? Or I'd call Martha Linderman and I'd say, hey, you've been working in behavioral health policy forever. Like, what does this bill really do? Or what's the history of this policy? Like, that is where I want us to get. When folks are calling us and asking, when folks are calling you and asking for your opinion on the policies before them, so that they can be more effective at advancing solid policy solutions up in Tallahassee. So, and I think that the way to get there is by building these relationships and by, being engaged and knowledgeable about the process. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure presenting this to you today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was fantastic. I think one of the key things that definitely hit me most was that key point about relationship building as the foundation for influence and making things happen. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for the incredible presentation. With that, I'm going to introduce, finally, it is my pleasure to introduce Reverend J.C. Pritchett, Senior Pastor of Faith Church, to give the closing invocation. Reverend J.C. Pritchett II is President and Executive Director of the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance. IMA shows up, speaks up, and reaches out. IMA has been a historic voice of faith leaders for justice and equity and looks toward a future in which all people are valued, honored, and thrive. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Reverend Pritchett.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. Let's pray. Thankful we are creator of all things for this conversation around healing, health, and hope. Our desires and prayers are that you use us to collaborate and partner to find and create areas and avenues to bring healing, health, and hope to our communities. We are weak, but you are strong. We are so small, but you are so big. This crisis seems so overpowering and challenging. We agree and believe that solutions and answers can be found when we ask for something and for someone greater to help us. Please help us heal our land. Help us mend lives and hearts. Help us bring recovery to the addicted, companionship to the lonely, treatment to the sick, and lift up the heads of those who feel down. This is our prayer. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Pritchett, for that fantastic invocation. With that, I am posting in the chat a survey link. Thank you all for joining us today. Our next Link, Lunch, and Learn webinar is going to be February 15th from 12 to 1 p.m. We hope that you can join us next time as well. And please visit the link to the survey in the chat. We hope that you'll take the last couple of minutes to complete it. Thank you so much, as your input is invaluable. And with that, have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you all so much.
Y'all, and I'll stick around for a little bit to answer any questions that you may have. I am well aware that I gave y'all a ton of information in a short amount of time. So I'm around if you'd like to ask any questions. So it looks like some folks had a hard time reading the slides. What I will do is I will email you the slide deck, and I'll also email you my one pager on different bills that I'm following in relation to. It's not actually a one pager; it's a big document that I'm following in relation to behavioral health bills. And I'll use the login today to get that information to you. Any other questions? Yes, I'll send out the slides. Lots of questions about sending out the slides. I love that folks shared the links to myfloridahealth.gov and the floridachannel.org. They're great. Okay, well, it looks like there's no other questions. What I can tell you is that I'll do an update, maybe a 5-minute update next in February, so on bills that are being heard, so that we can stay engaged and knowing what's coming down the pike. With that, thank you all for joining us, and this has been a usual and fantastic meeting of Link Lunch and Learn. Bye now.